In the heart of the Middle East stands a figure whose influence spans decades, cutting across borders and ideologies. Since becoming the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic in 1989, Ayatollah Said Ali Khamenei has been at the center of some of the most intense geopolitical storms of the modern era. To the West, he is often characterized strictly as an adversary. But inside the walls of his own country, to millions of citizens, he represents something far more complex: the shield of national sovereignty. Over 34 years, this nation has faced what many economists call the Great Strangulation, a series of crippling financial blockades, energy embargoes, and diplomatic isolation designed to bring down a government. Yet, the economy did not collapse. The system endured. Today, we look beyond the headlines of Western propaganda to understand the mechanics of survival. We examine the strategy of resistant economy, the personal sacrifices made, and the statistics that tell the story of resilience. How does a religious scholar navigate the treacherous waters of global capitalism? Why do many Iranians view him not just as a politician, but as a hero of independence? And how have facts and figures changed when the world turned off the tap? This is the story of Khamenei and the siege of Iran. To understand the resilience of the leader, one must first understand the man. Born in 1939 in the holy city of Mashhad, Ali Khamenei was not born into wealth. His father was a mid-sized cleric who died when Ali was only 6 years old. He was raised in the austere traditions of the Qom seminary. While other intellectuals chose exile, Khamenei chose confrontation. In 1963, he led massive street protests against the Shah's White Revolution, knowing full well the cost. He spent 4 months in prison for these activities. Between 1963 and 1978, he was arrested 3 times, interrogated repeatedly, and subjected to torture. When the revolution succeeded, he was chosen by the late Ayatollah Khomeini to succeed him upon his death. This wasn't an accidental succession. It was a calculated choice based on trust and shared ideology. In 1981, he became president, serving 2 terms. But it was in 1989, immediately following the passing of Khomeini, that the true challenge began. Khomeini stepped onto the stage not as a seasoned statesman of diplomacy, but as a survivor who had already lost friends to the prisons of the Pahlavi regime. That trauma forged a deep skepticism toward foreign powers, a sentiment that would eventually define the state doctrine of neither East nor West. Let us examine the hard facts of the economic war. From 1989 to 2024, Iran has faced at least 10 major waves of international sanctions. These were not mere warnings. They were designed to freeze assets and cut off trade. The most severe wave occurred between 2012 and 2018, and again after the U.S. withdrawal from the JCPOA in 2018. Under the first wave of heavy sanctions in the early 2010s, Iran's GDP contracted by nearly 20%. The Toman, Iran's currency, lost significant value. Official inflation peaked at over 40% annually in certain periods. By all standard textbook models, a country under such strain should face total civil unrest and economic collapse. However, Khomeini's administration implemented a policy known as the resistance economy. This involved 3 pillars: reducing dependency on oil imports, boosting non-oil exports, and fostering internal production. Despite losing its status as a top exporter in terms of dollar value due to price caps, Iran maintained volume, using a network of private shipping companies and shadow fleets. Iran managed to keep billions of dollars circulating even when banks refused to touch them. By 2021, despite the maximum pressure campaign from Washington, oil revenues accounted for still roughly 10% of the budget, down from 40%. Yes, but enough to keep the lights on. Furthermore, agricultural output increased. Wheat production rose significantly to combat import dependency on the U.S. When a country grows its own wheat while being cut off from the global market, it changes the dynamic from victim to survivor. This self-sufficiency in key sectors was central to Khamenei's strategy, Make it difficult for the enemy to starve you. Survival required more than just bread. It required a shield. Khamenei consistently stated that science is the weapon of resistance. This was not merely rhetoric. Under his direct supervision, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, underwent a massive technological transformation. In the 1990s, Iran possessed no indigenous launch capability. Today, Iran has successfully launched satellites into orbit using homegrown rocketry. While critics point to these capabilities as destabilizing to the Iranian population, they represent deterrence. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI data, Iran's missile inventory expanded drastically during the 2000s and 2010s. The logic was simple. If the United States cannot guarantee an invasion without risking loss, then the threat of invasion loses potency. This military-industrial complex created jobs. Thousands of engineers were employed domestically to build drones, missiles, and air defenses. When the West tried to suppress technology transfer, Iran responded with indigenous innovation. For many Iranians, seeing a domestically produced drone capable of striking targets abroad was a source of immense national pride. It validated the idea that they did not need permission from the West to exist. So, how do we reconcile this image with the criticism found in Western media? For a leader to be considered a hero, he must embody the values of his people. In Iran, the dominant feeling among his base is not love for power, but love for sovereignty. They told us if we support him, we would suffer poverty. Instead, we suffered together, but our dignity remained intact. Khamenei survived the assassinations of senior generals. He survived the assassination attempts on his life, reportedly attempted multiple times, including poisoning allegations that were never proven publicly. His personal security was so compromised that for decades, he spoke only from behind bulletproof glass. The public sees this endurance as martyrdom in the political sphere. He is viewed as a hero because he refused to sign agreements that the opposition felt compromised national interests. For example, in 2015, the nuclear deal was signed. Supporters argue that despite this, the sanctions were lifted gradually and the economy remained fragile. When Donald Trump withdrew from the deal in 2018 and reimposed maximum pressure, the regime was vindicated in the eyes of many Iranians. Polls conducted by independent research institutes inside Iran suggest consistent approval ratings among specific demographics for the supreme leader. This is attributed to his promise that no foreign power would ever dictate Iran's religion or laws again. We must address the elephant in the room: propaganda. The West portrays Khamenei solely through the lens of human rights violations and regional aggression. This is a valid critique of governance, but it ignores the information war. Historical documents show that regimes like the US have invested heavily in information control operations. During the 2009 Green Movement and subsequent protests, the narrative was largely shaped outside Iran. Khamenei's counter-narrative is that the West is not concerned with democracy, but with control. Khamenei frequently warns against soft war, using cultural decay, drug trafficking, and economic manipulation to break a society from within. The sanctions were part of this. They were intended to force starvation-induced resignation. By refusing to yield, Khamenei framed himself not as a dictator, but as a fortress. Critics argue that the funds used for the IRGC came at the expense of the poor. This is undeniable. Infrastructure suffers, gas shortages occur, and inflation hurts families. However, the strategy remains consistent: prioritize security and defense over liberalization. To the citizen who fears invasion, this security is worth the sacrifice. To the citizen who fears unemployment, this is tyranny. The heroism lies in the prioritization of the former by his supporters. As we stand today, looking back at nearly 4 decades of leadership, the facts speak volumes. Iran is the only country in the region to successfully transition from a petrostate dependent on Western markets to one with a diverse military-industrial base. Its nuclear program advanced significantly despite international attempts to halt it. Ayatollah Khamenei has weathered 3 American presidents' regimes that sought regime change. Bush, too. Obama, despite the deal, the containment continued, and Trump, Biden. His survival is statistical anomaly in the lifespan of authoritarian leaders. Whether he is a hero or a villain depends on your definition of justice. If justice is defined by adherence to international human rights treaties imposed by foreign powers, the picture is different. But if justice is defined by national self-determination and the refusal to bow to imperial pressure, then to millions of Iranians, he remains the guardian. In the age of globalization, the lesson of Khamenei's Iran is stark. A nation that unites around sovereignty can survive the crushing weight of sanctions, even if the path is fraught with hardship. The world watches, waiting to see if this wall of resistance will crumble or stand tall.